I want to tell you something I've spent a long time being ashamed of, and I'm 71 years old now, so I've decided I'm done being ashamed of it. I went bankrupt twice. Not once, twice. In the country that's supposed to be the land of opportunity, I failed at the American dream not once, but two full times. And both times I lost damn near everything I had. And here's the part nobody would believe if I told them back home. Right now, this morning, I'm sitting on a little balcony in a city in the north of Thailand called Chiang Mai, with a bowl of khao soi cooling in front of me and a motorbike shop of my own down on the ground floor with my name on the sign. A third business at 71. In a country where I didn't speak a word of the language when I got off the plane. And it's the first one of the three that's ever actually made me happy. So let me back up, because if you're watching this, maybe you know the particular kind of quiet that comes after you've failed at something big. Maybe you're sitting somewhere doing the math on a life that didn't add up the way they promised it would. Let me tell you the whole thing from the start. My name is Walter. Most people call me Walt. I spent most of my working life in Michigan, outside Grand Rapids, and I was, God help me, a believer. I believed the whole story. Work hard, take your shot, build something, and America will reward you for it. So I took my shot. In my 40s, I sank everything I had into a hardware store. A good one. Real lumber, real advice. The kind of place where a man could come in, not knowing what he needed and leave knowing. I ran that store for 11 years and I loved it. I knew my regulars by name. I knew which contractor was building what, whose deck was going in that summer, whose daughter was getting married and needed the fence fixed before the photos. I sponsored a little league team. There's a photo somewhere of a bunch of 9-year-olds in green shirts that said Walt's Hardware across the back. And I'm not ashamed to say I'd give a lot to hold that photo right now. But, quick thing before we continue. If you've ever thought about retiring in Asia, I created the Retire in Asia playbook. It's packed with everything you need to know before making the move. The best countries, real living costs, visas, healthcare, housing, and the biggest mistakes to avoid. If that sounds useful, you'll find the link below. All right, let's get back to the video. Then a big box chain opened up 4 miles down the road. You know how this story goes. You've maybe lived this story. They could sell a box of screws for less than I paid my supplier for it. I held on for 2 years bleeding money, mortgaged the house to keep the lights on, laid off a kid named Tyler who'd worked for me since high school, and cried in my office when I had to do it. And in the end, I lost the store, and very nearly the house too. First bankruptcy. I was 54 years old, and I remember sitting in that lawyer's office signing the papers thinking, well, that's the low point. At least now I know what the bottom feels like. I didn't know the bottom yet. The bottom had a basement. Because I did what a stubborn man does. I got back up. Told myself the first one was bad luck. Bad timing, the big chain, not me. So in my 60s, after clawing back a little savings and cashing out what was left of a small pension, I tried again. A little restaurant this time. Breakfast and lunch, home cooking, the kind of diner where the waitress knows your order. My wife Diane and I ran it together the first couple of years, and those were good years, I want to say that. She passed in 2018, and I kept the place going, partly because it was the last thing we'd built together and I couldn't stand to let it go. The regulars felt like the last people on earth who still saw me as somebody who'd made it, not somebody who'd lost it. And then 2020 happened. I don't need to explain 2020 to anybody watching this. I held on as long as I could, took on debt I had no business taking on at my age, borrowed against a life insurance policy, maxed out cards I swore I'd never touch. And by the time it was over, I was 68 years old and bankrupt for the second time in my life. And this time, there was no house to mortgage because I'd already lost that. There was no pension left because I'd already spent it. There was just me, 68, twice failed, a widower, sitting in a rented apartment I could barely afford in a country that I suddenly understood did not actually have a soft place for a man like me to land. That's the thing they don't tell you about failing in America when you're old. It's not just the money. It's the shame. It's the way people look at you. My own brother, and I love him, but my own brother said to me at a family dinner, "Walt, at some point, you got to stop swinging." Like I was an embarrassment. Like the swinging was the problem, and not the whole rigged game. I drove home from that dinner, and I sat in the car in the driveway for a long time before I could make myself go inside to that empty apartment. I want to be honest about how dark it got because I promised myself I'd be honest with you. There was about a year in there where I stopped answering the phone. I let it go to voicemail, and I'd listen to my sister's messages get more and more worried, and I still wouldn't call back. I'd sit in that apartment and do the arithmetic over and over. Social Security wasn't going to be much because I'd spent my life pouring money into businesses instead of a 401k. Rent kept going up. Healthcare, forget it. I priced out what it would cost just to be old and sick in America, and the number was a number I was never going to have. I did the math on my own life, and the math said I was going to run out of road somewhere around 78, broke, in a subsidized apartment, waiting for a phone that didn't ring. And I'll be straight with you, the way I wish somebody had been straight with me. There were mornings I wasn't sure I wanted to see 78 if that's what 78 looked like. I don't say that for sympathy. I say it because I suspect somebody watching this knows exactly the feeling I'm describing. And I want you to know an old man made it through to the other side of that feeling. And there was another side. So how in the world did I end up here, in Thailand, with a motorbike shop and a reason to get up at 6 in the morning? I'll tell you. And it starts with a younger guy I never expected to learn anything from. There was a fellow named Danny who used to come into my restaurant back when I had the restaurant. Younger guy, maybe 40, worked remotely doing something with computers I never fully understood. And one day, near the end, when he could see I was struggling, he sat at the counter and he told me he'd spent 2 years living in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And he said something I didn't pay attention to at the time, but it stuck in me like a splinter. He said, "Walt, over there, being older isn't a strike against you. It's the opposite. Over there, they actually respect an old man who's still got some fight in him." I didn't think about it again for 2 years. Then, at the very bottom, broke in 69, I was lying awake at 3 in the morning, and Danny's sentence just floated up out of nowhere. Over there, being older isn't a strike against you. And I thought, I have nothing left to lose. That's not a figure of speech. I mean, I had, at that point, almost literally nothing left to lose. So I did the most reckless, ridiculous thing a sensible Michigan man could do. I sold what little I had, the truck, Diane's good china that I couldn't bear to look at anyway, the tools, and it broke my heart to sell the tools. I cashed out to almost nothing, and I bought a one-way ticket to a country I could not have found on a map. to a city I could not pronounce on the word of a computer fellow who used to order the number 4. My sister thought I'd lost my mind. "You're 69 years old, Walter. You're going to a third world country with no money and no plan? To do what?" And I said the first slightly alive thing I'd said in years. I said, "I've failed at everything that made sense. Let me go fail at something that doesn't." Now I want to be honest about the flight, because it wasn't hope. I want to be clear about that. It was closer to a man who's tried every door in a long hallway, and there's one left at the end, and he doesn't believe it'll open either. But he's already walked this far, so he might as well rattle the handle. 20-some hours in a seat that wasn't built for a big man, and somewhere over the Pacific in the dark, I had a thought I hadn't had in years. I thought, nobody in the place I'm going knows the failed version of me. Nobody there watched me lose the store or close the diner or sit in that car in the driveway. To them, I'll just be a new old man who showed up. And for some reason, that felt less like loneliness and more like a clean sheet of paper. I landed in Bangkok in the kind of heat that hits you like a wet towel the second the doors open. The noise, the color, the chaos of that airport, and my first honest thought was, "Walter, you have made a terrible, expensive, final mistake." I connected up to Chiang Mai on a little plane, and I came down over these green mountains with mist sitting in the valleys, and something in my chest flickered, just a flicker, like a pilot light that's been out for years catching for half a second. Here's what saved me, and I didn't plan it. My first week, jet-lagged and half terrified, I was renting a cheap room, and the motorbike I'd rented to get around broke down. And I'm a hardware man, a fix-it man. That's who I've always been, so I crouched down right there on the street and started tinkering with it. And an old Thai man from the shop across the way came over, and he didn't shoo me off. He crouched down next to me. We didn't share a single word of language. And for about an hour, two old men who couldn't talk to each other fixed a motorbike together in the heat, pointing and grunting and laughing. And when we got it running, he stood up and he pressed his hands together and gave me this little bow, this thing they call a Y, and he looked at me with what I can only call respect. Nobody had looked at me with respect in about 4 years. His name, I'd learned, was Sumchai, and he owned the little repair shop. And over the next weeks, I kept coming back, and he kept letting me help, and neither of us could explain a thing to the other, but I was useful again. Do you understand what that word means to a man who's failed twice? Useful. My hands were good for something. My gray hair wasn't an embarrassment here. Sumchai treated my age like it meant I knew things. Now let me talk about money for a minute, because I know somebody watching is doing the exact math I was doing, lying awake at 3 a.m, and I'm not going to round the numbers to make a point. In Michigan, my little apartment was eating up most of what I had, and I was miserable in it. Here in Chiang Mai, I rent a clean one-bedroom with a balcony, 10 minutes from the old city, for the equivalent of about $280 a month. A full meal at a local spot, a plate of pad krapao or a bowl of khao soi, and a cold drink runs you $1.50, maybe $2. I went to a private hospital here, a good one, Western-trained doctors, for a checkup and some blood work that would have cost me a small fortune back home, and the whole visit was about $40. No 3-month wait. I walked in. I live, and I mean actually live, eat out most nights, get a proper Thai massage every week for $6 that keeps this old back working, see a doctor whenever I please, on a fraction of what I was drowning under in Michigan. And I still had a little cushion left over. Which brings me to the part I really want to tell you about, the part that changed my whole life. Because the cheap living isn't the story. The cheap living is just what made the story possible. After a few months of helping some chai for free, just to feel useful, I noticed something. This city is full of foreigners like me, older folks and younger backpackers both, all renting motorbikes, and almost none of them knew a thing about maintaining one. And there was nobody serving them who spoke English and understood their nervousness about the whole business. I've spent my whole life in retail, 11 years running a hardware store. I know how to talk to a nervous customer who doesn't know what they need. That's the one thing 2 bankruptcies never took away from me. So I had an idea. And here's where I have to tell you the honest, practical part. Because I know that's what half of you are really here for. You cannot, and I want to be very clear about this, you cannot just show up in Thailand and open a business the way you would back home. A foreigner can't own most of a business outright here. There are visa rules, there are ownership rules, there's a whole thicket of it, and this is exactly the kind of thing that a lonely, hopeful old man can get badly burned by if he doesn't know the traps. I nearly got burned myself. Early on, a fellow expat I met in a bar, real friendly, real convincing, offered to set me up with a company for a few $1,000s up front. Cash, handshake, no lawyer. Thank God something in my gut, the same gut that had already been burned twice, told me to walk away. I found out later he'd done the same pitch to 3 other new arrivals and vanished on 2 of them. What actually worked, and I'll keep it simple, was partnering the right way with a local person I'd come to genuinely trust. That was Somchai's daughter, Ploy, who spoke good English and had a good head for business. We set it up properly, legally, with a real Thai lawyer, not a guy in a bar. I put in my knowledge and my English, and my hands and the family put in the local ownership and the trust in the community. I sorted out the right long-stay visa for a man my age, and I'll tell you, the visa side of this is a whole education in itself, the kind of thing you want to understand before you get on the plane, not after. And we opened a little shop, motorbike rentals and repairs for foreigners, run by an old American who will actually explain things to you and won't rip you off. A third business at 70 years old in Thailand. Now I have to make a turn here because I promised you honesty, and I don't want you walking away thinking I floated into paradise and everything was perfect. It wasn't. There was a stretch about 5 months in where the whole thing nearly came apart, and I had to face the question I'd been running from across an ocean. I got sick. Not badly, but I got a bad stomach infection, dengue's cousin, and I ended up in that hospital for 3 days, and lying there, I got scared in a way that had nothing to do with the illness. Because my sister called, and she said the thing I knew was coming. Walter, this is insane. You're 70 years old, alone, sick, in a country where I can't even get to you. Come home. Come home where I can look after you. And I lay there, and I had to decide. And I'll tell you the truth about what was really going on inside me because it wasn't about the sickness. Here was the real thing. The splinter under the splinter. I was scared that if this third business failed, if I failed a third time, and this time 9,000 miles from home, that it would prove my brother right, that the swinging really was the problem, that I really was just a foolish old man who never knew when to quit. And underneath even that, quieter still, was Diane. Some part of me felt like a man who'd lost everything twice, had no business being happy again, no business building something new, when the person I'd built the good years with wasn't here to see it. As long as I stayed small and scared and quiet, I could tell myself I was being sensible. Getting up and swinging one more time felt like tempting fate to humiliate me one final time. And it was Somchai, who barely speaks 10 words of English, who broke it open. He came to the hospital. This 75-year-old man came and sat by my bed, and through ploy translating, he said something I'll carry to my grave. He said, "In Thailand, we don't count how many times a man falls. We count that he is still standing." And Ploy added quietly, "He says you are not a failed man, Walter. He says you are a man who has not stopped. We don't count how many times a man falls. We count that he is still standing." I'm 71 years old, and I've heard a lot of words in my life. Nobody ever handed me my own dignity back the way that old mechanic did in that hospital room. I got out of that hospital, and I called my sister back, and I said, "I'm not coming home, and I need you to hear why." Because for 20 years, America told me my failures were who I was. And these people who've got almost nothing looked at the exact same man and saw somebody worth respecting. I can't leave the place that gave me that back. And there was a long quiet on the line, the kind that costs a fortune on international rates. And then my sister said, "Then I'm going to come see it. I want to see the place that did what none of us could." And she did. About 6 months later, and I watched Chiang Mai do to her the same thing it did to me. By day 3, she was sitting in Somchai's kitchen, learning to fold dumplings with Ploy, the two of them laughing, and she looked over at me with wet eyes and said, "Walt, I'm sorry I tried to bring you home. I get it now." So let me tell you what an ordinary Tuesday looks like now, because the ordinary days turned out to be the whole point. And it took me 70 years to understand that. I'm up at 6 without an alarm, because the day pulls at you here. I walked down to a little food stall run by a woman everyone calls Auntie Knock, and within a couple weeks she stopped letting me order. She just brings me what she's decided I'm having. And the first time she did that, I nearly teared up right there over my rice soup. Then I open the shop. Ploy handles the books. I handle the customers and the wrenches. I've got a nervous 60-year-old Canadian coming in this afternoon who's never ridden a motorbike and is terrified, and I'm going to spend an hour with him and send him off feeling capable, and I will love every minute of it. Because that's the thing they took from me twice in America, and Thailand handed right back. I'm useful. I'm the old man who knows things. There's a young Thai kid named Beam who apprentices with me now, and he calls me a word that Ploy tells me is close to teacher, and I don't have the words for what that does to me. In the evenings, there's always something. Somchai's family folds me into every meal, every temple festival, every birthday. I have not eaten dinner alone in over a year. Think about that. In Michigan, I ate nearly every dinner alone, doing the math of my own funeral. Here, not once. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's perfect, because I promised you honesty, and you deserve it. The heat takes getting used to. The rainy season is no joke, and there's a burning season up here in the spring, where the air quality gets bad and you plan around it. The bureaucracy, the visa runs, the paperwork can make you want to pull out what's left of your hair, and it changes, so you have to stay on top of it. And yes, there are people who see an old foreigner and see a walking wallet, and you have to keep your wits about you. It is a real place with real problems, not a postcard. But here's what I've landed on. At 71, with whatever years I've got left, I spent 2 decades and 2 entire fortunes chasing the American dream. And it broke me twice and told me I was the one who was broken. And it turned out the thing I actually needed wasn't a bigger swing or a better economy. What I needed was to live somewhere that didn't count my failures against me. Somewhere an old man's hands and an old man's experience were treated like they were worth something. If you're sitting somewhere right now doing the math on a life that didn't add up, and some part of you has decided your best swings are behind you, I'm not going to tell you the answer is Thailand. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I'll tell you the answer is somewhere, and it's very likely not where you are, if where you are has decided you're finished. And look, if any part of this lit even a flicker in you, do yourself one favor before you talk yourself out of it like I almost did. Get the honest version of the facts, not the fantasy and not the fear. Because the traps out here are real, and so are the ways to do it right. I put together everything I wish somebody had handed me before I got on that plane. The real costs, the real visa and business rules, the cities compared, and the traps to watch for. It's down in the description. An informed flicker beats a fantasy every time. As for me, I'm Walt. I'm 71 years old. I went bankrupt twice in the country that promised me everything. And I built my third business, the one that finally worked in a country I couldn't find on a map. There's a motorbike downstairs with a nervous Canadian's name on the schedule, and Auntie Knox got my dinner figured out already, and Somchai's expecting me at his grandson's birthday tonight. Diane, if you can hear me, I hope you're not sore at me for being happy. I think you'd have liked it here. I think you'd have been folding dumplings right alongside my sister. They don't count how many times you fall here. They say that you're still standing. So whoever you are, wherever you're sitting, if you've got one more swing left in you, don't let anybody tell you the game is over. There's one more door at the end of the hall. Go rattle the handle. Thank you for sitting with an old man and his story. Take care of yourselves out there. And make sure to subscribe and check out my playbook. Link is in bio.